Hey everybody, Scuffy here again with video number 2 for the Horus Heresy Legions going in here today, and I plan on discussing card by card breakdown for the Imperial Army, which is here one of 3 neutral factions. So Imperial Army neutral right at the top of the page. These factions here are actually available to all legions. You can mix and match. You can mix and match with Chaos, with the Mechanicum, and then obviously these guys. The only cards that cannot be included in your Legion decks are the Warlords for the neutral factions. In this case, currently the Imperial Army only has one with Colonel Oratov. Oratov has actually got an awesome ability. He's been reworked several times to kind of work, because before, the way he started out before, he just wasn't functioning. So at this point in time, he starts out the game with 1 energy more. He has a low initiative, which kind of plays out to even out that 1 energy more. However, he's going to gain an infantry troop in his hand if he has no troops on the table, which, depending on the game state and what the game gives you, sometimes he can end up with some amazing things in his hand. Sometimes he can end up with some not so amazing things, but the important thing is he always has a troop available to him, which is important because of his ability, which requires a troop to be on the field. The ability gives a front line to a friendly troop, which mid-game and late game can really start to stack up if he can keep troops on the table, especially some of the bigger ones that you'll see here, as well as some of the ones that are in the Mechanicum and the Chaos, but primarily Imperial Army have got some beefy high drops that he can turn into a very nice wall. So just kind of going through the cards here. Unsettled Populace, 0/1/1. If you've started the game and you don't have too many cards, and you're looking for something to speed up, you could go with this, but I think this is just kind of a joke card. It's not, no. Burning Tower is a new addition to the game. This is one of the cards that came out with the Isfahan expansion. So this is a neat card, but I don't know how it could be executed just yet. Again, all of these cards here that we're going to see can be used in any of the Legion decks, so there's a lot of options, and depending on how the Legions and how the neutral factions themselves play, I like the concept of keeping a low energy for some of those decks that start to rely on the game state, the energy going up, but I don't quite know exactly how that could be best utilized at this point in time, but it's got a lot of potential. I'm looking forward to seeing that in circulation very soon. So the Call of the Regulars, you don't see these guys unless they come up in some sort of random. Oratov's ability is a prime example. They're just not, for a 1-drop, the 2 that you're going to see most likely are these guys here, the Facadian Infantry, because of their backlash, which is great. They draw a card. You're going to throw them out there, and either your opponent's going to kill them for the sake of killing them and giving you a card, or you're going to ping something for 1 damage and you're going to get a card. It's a card for card. It's a great way to start a game out if you can throw those out there. You see them in certain builds that rely on swarming, rely on card drawing to get to those key cards, World Eater decks, some of the Tarvitz decks. You see them in event decks as well. And then Farron's Militia. And this one here is really interesting if you can get it to work, or if you're lucky enough where they can't get to him. At the start of your turn, you put another copy of him in. So he starts snowballing. If you've got 2, you get 4. If you've got 4, well, you're going to max out at 6, but you can get a whole board. The counter to this is they all have 1 health, so they are very flimsy. If 1 frag grenade could wipe out your entire militia force. But they are something that if you can get a wall, a good front line to kind of barricade them behind and drop them, and they don't have a seek and destroy or an instant kill, you can start snowballing and then throw militia forces at your opponent for 2 each turn. Some of the things I like doing in some of the event decks with the Iron Hands, with Ferrus Manus, is beefing those guys up, making them hard to kill the first turn, and then letting them sit there for an extra turn. Amadeus had a great build because he had a built-in front line, and you could basically, instead of throwing them out 1 at a time, you build them up to 4. So instead of having just 1 or 2 extra to deal with, they've got 4 to deal with each turn, and it makes it really fast problem until they hit you with some widespread damage. Lictitio Divinatus. This was a event reward card. There was an option here for a Chaos version of this, and there was an option for the Imperial Guard version of this, the Imperial Army 1. I like this one better. I don't put it in any of my decks, though. I like it when my opponent plays it, and I know there are decks out there that want to draw cards, and they love drawing their cards, and they love getting to it, and for a 1 for 2 cards, it's not bad. It can fit in any deck, especially if you're just looking for something a little extra, but it has never not benefited me as the opponent. So every time somebody's played Lictitio Divinatus, I've gotten a great card from it, and I've thanked them, and then I get a card on my turn, and I get to play the card that they gave me. So it's a good card, and it definitely has its uses for the decks that people put in, but I don't use it, and I still benefit from it. So I can't not like that card. These guys here, the Furion 2nd Auxiliary, have got a nice little rally. Nothing really to build upon. I mean, if you're building too many 1-drops in here, you're going to kind of deplete your hand very quickly for a weak force. But mid-game, if you've got something, they can drop them between 2 troops. They can give +1 to adjacent troops, and that's permanent. That doesn't go away. That's not for that turn. There are some troops in here that just do it for just the turn. So Ricochet, starting to see Ricochet played a little bit more. There are other decks that kind of thrive on it. The Nev deck is a good example of this. Tarvitz also can profit from this deck. It deals 1 damage, and if it survives, you deal damage to another unit. So you could technically, if they've got 3 units on the table, you could do 1 damage to each of those units, or you could just kill the 1 for 1. It's not a bad option, and if you are playing a neutral faction, you don't have too many direct damage cards, so it is one way to go in terms of looking at direct damage. Winter Squad, this is a 1 for 2. Usually see these guys popping up as a result of the game giving them to you in your hand, or as a result of the Ornithop's Barge giving these guys. There's better front lines, even for 2-3 energy, than a 1-2. 1-2 isn't going to do you any good for just about anything other than buying you an action. Abandoned Supplies. I like this card a lot. This is new. This is one of the cards from the expansion that we've seen. A lot of people are using it. I think some people are not using it in the best case scenario. Quite frankly, I think if your deck has more than a third of its deck below cost of 4, you shouldn't be using this. Some people may argue differently, but I think the big trade-off is for those decks like the Salamander decks and the Iron Hand decks, even the Mechanicum decks, or decks that want to focus on the larger drops and have a decent early to mid-range. That's okay, and then if you've got the turn and you can pull out an Abandoned Supplies and get one of those heavy drops for 2 turns earlier, that's great. That's a good trade-off. I've had games where I've played an Abandoned Supplies and it just gave me my other Abandoned Supplies. That's the chance that you take. There are also those games where if you've got too much of a low cost, you get a 1-drop or a 2-drop card, so you're really just trading a card for a card without really gaining the benefit. Like again, some people might argue that yeah, you can still play that card, but I would rather play a bigger card for a reduced cost as opposed to playing a card that I could have played that turn already. So if I'm playing a 2 and I draw 2, then it's a 0. I could still play it, but I could have played it that turn already. So the additional benefit of having the cost reduced by 2 is lost, if that makes any sense. So either which way, I think this has got a lot of uses, a lot of options. You're seeing it in a lot of decks who people have got it. If you can squeeze in a copy, or if you find yourself you've got a large selection of cards that cost over 4, or a decent amount even at the 4 level, consider getting yourself an Abandoned Supplies. Gazald's Defenders, no, it doesn't do anything for you. It's a 1-4. It's not going to do enough damage to make up for the 4. Might as well just be a 2-2 or 2-1, and it doesn't have frontline, it doesn't have anything. I just no. So Grops Raiders, they have frontline. They're 3-1. They're very flimsy, but you kind of throw them out there if you have them like in an event deck, or if you get them from an Ortov's Barge. Usually you see these guys from there. They're flimsy, but if they stick around for a turn, you can just might as well just throw them at for 3. It's something. It's not anything I'd include in a deck. I'd go with a lot better options here, like Nisor Scouts. These guys are always good. And granted, yeah, this is a rare card, but stealth, sneak attack, they can sit there until you want to use them, provided that they don't get hit by like defensive satellites or artillery strike. And if you've got like, if you're playing with a deck that can buff your cards in like Ferrus Manus or Ingethil, or trying to think if there's anybody else currently that can buff passive. If there are, they're escaping me right now, so I apologize. But yeah, you pump these guys up for a couple turns or throw a couple marks of chaos on them, and then this little one from 3 can suddenly become something very sneaky. You know, the Emperor's Children, you've got this guy, and you throw out like some of their perfection buffs, and you can ramp these guys up to 2/5 or even higher later game, and they can really do some nasty damage. And then stealth, you know, stealth cards are natural targets because people don't want those sitting around because it's going to be damage all the time. Sabotage is a great rare in early decks, especially when you don't have access to too many rares. I had a Sabotage, I think, for my second crate when I first started playing the game, and I used that for a good month, and it never let me down. Every card has an ability to an extent, unless you're playing like in an event deck where they give you a couple cards without ability. So being able to take away the ability, whether that's frontline, which is a great way to remove, or if it's, you know, removing sneak attack or hidden anything. It won't hit anything in stealth, but it's great. Or if they buffed up a card really nicely on their turn and then you just sabotage it. If you don't have any destruction, sabotage is the next best thing. So if you've got that early on and you don't have access to too many destruction things, consider sabotage. It is a good choice. So the Syrian 12th Regiment, these guys here, they're cheap. I think you get 2 of them to start the game with, so you should be familiar with them. But one thing that the Imperial Army have is they have a lot of frontline choices. So if you find that your deck needs or wants frontline choices, yes, they're flimsy. They can be easily disposed of. If you're going up against Abaddon, you might as well not start with these guys in your hand because they're just going to be targets. However, they're a cheap frontline who can hold at least one direct attack from a warlord outside of abilities or cards. That's going to buy you a turn or 2. So if you're finding yourself needing cheap frontline, the Imperial Army is where you look, and you may look at including at least one of those guys, if not more, if you don't have options for some of the higher ups, or if you don't have some of the rarities. Underground Fort is good, especially in a Ornithop deck. You see these, usually 2 of them if you can. If they can get these out first turn, they can really get going. The benefit is obvious. Imperial Army troops cost 1 less. It's a target. It can't attack, so they're going to have to do something with it. And if they can't, it gives you a turn, and then you've got cards coming in 1 turn earlier, in addition to Ornithop's ability being +1 energy, that can really get going. If you've got 2 of these out, you're just going to start steamrolling things. And yes, once you get a troop out with Ornithop, you don't get more troops in your hand. However, if you built your deck right, you should have troops that you're relying on. So it's a good card for Ornithop, which is really the only deck you're going to see that's Imperial Army heavy. If you're playing the Chaos build, I guess you might go Imperial Army heavy, or maybe a Salamander Imperial Army heavy. But for the most part, it's really tied for that specific faction. These guys here, these are good in event decks. They always kind of come in the pinch to kind of up everybody up. It's a nice rally ability. It only works with the Imperial Army troops though. So again, a specific build if you're building for the Imperial Army, or if you've got a high level. Otherwise, these guys are just going to be a 2/2 with not doing anything else for you. Bernard Sappers, these guys are not as useful currently. They have use and they still see use, but at more of a one of. than anything else presently. But being able to keep them lurking in stealth for the most part, and then if your opponent throws out a vehicle or a structure, they just have to hit it. They're going to die, but they're going to take that thing with them, and it could be a big beefy thing to begin with. Note, it has to be damaged, so if that big beefy thing is shielded, they're not going to do anything. You've got to take that shield down first before you can utilize these guys. They are very vulnerable to defensive satellites. They're very vulnerable to artillery strike if you don't have enough targets. So again, as a one of, and there's not enough decks currently that are running vehicles and structure heavy. It's a lot of troops and a lot of tactics right now which are seeing play, which is why it's taken down the usefulness of these guys, as well as this one here. Bunker early on in the game, if you started out and you've got yourself 2 bunkers, it's not going to do anything for you offensively unless somebody jams it, but it is going to buy you time, and that's not a bad thing to have in the early games, especially like when you first encounter Karn for several times and he's got to run into this bunker, you know, 2 to 3 times. That's going to eat up some of his health. It's going to buy you time to bring up bigger things. So early as a player, if you include 2 bunkers, that's not a bad option. Eventually you're going to have to make the choice to cut the bunkers for better things, and there are a lot better things out there. But again, as a front line for a 3 cost, it's not a bad choice. Call infantry, I don't use these guys. I've seen people use them. I don't know if they're just using them for the fact that they're trying to get bodies out on the table, or they didn't have any other options, or I'm not quite sure. It puts a second unit in play, which is great, because then instead of having 1 target, there's 2 targets to deal with, but they're just as disposable, if more so. Frag grenade is going to kill the 1 and do 1 damage to these guys, and most likely they'll get pinged by something else. If I'm a Corax and they play these guys, I love it because it gives me an instant turn to just dodge them with killing out that 2-1 with the stealth. I would pass on these guys. That's just my personal preference. I'm sure there's a deck out there that could enjoy benefiting from this, or at some point we might see some tactics that benefit with the more people you have on the board. But presently, your big 3 drop for the Imperials, these guys, Goldstone Hunters. Every time I see these guys, I just remember, Gold Member, and it's like, I love gold. And that voice from Mike Myers is in my head right now as I'm thinking it. But these guys, they're 3/3s. They're like magic bullet. They're fast and they're unstoppable. So that means so many things in this game. First off, you can play them. You can hit the Warlord with them. Doesn't matter if they've got a frontline troop or not. In the turn that you put them in. So if there's something that has 3 health that you got to get rid of, you drop these guys and you get rid of it. If you want to hit your opponent's Warlord for 3 and make them sit there as a target that they've got to burn an action on the next turn, because they will survive the attack, they benefit from that. The biggest combo that you see with these guys, and if you haven't seen it, it's probably because you're just not at that point yet where you've encountered the rarity in the game, because they are an epic rarity, but people love to hit these guys up with Mechindrites. So they throw out the Mechanicum troops that gain a Mechindrites, get 3 or 4 Mechindrites in their hand. Late game, 7 drop, throw these guys down, 4 Mechindrites on them, and that's almost the game swinger right there. If it isn't, then they usually use their Warlord as the seal dealer, the deal sealer. So Goldstone Hunters, if you see them in the shop and you have 400 gems, you will not regret getting these guys. For the long term being, they will serve a use in every army, in every deck, as a silver bullet option, as a having troop on the table option, as something to buff, as something to draw fire. They are probably, outside of like 1 other card on this list for the Imperial Guard, in my opinion, these guys are the best Imperial Army card in the game. They are in every deck that they can be in, that everybody's got them in, and that speaks for the card itself. So if you see it and you can get it, get it. If you haven't, but you get them in a crate, that's just as good as getting a Primarch. You should be really, really happy about that, because you are going to use these guys. And 3 might not seem like a lot, But like I said, there's a lot of ways to buff it and increase it, and you get the benefit of that buff the turn that they come in, so you don't have to sit and wait. And usually, if you time it right, that's going to make the game. So Jukebox Starsight is the other card that I would say rivals Goldstone in terms of popularity, in terms of utility. I do not currently have a Jukebox. I think he goes in most decks, not in every deck. There's some decks I would not include him in, but his ability is what people love. At the end of the turn, which is your turn, he's going to copy a card from their deck and give it to you. That's unless they have a terrible deck where they're just dealing with as many 0-1s or 1-1s that they can do on purpose, you're not going to get too many bad cards. You might get some cards that just won't work for you. Cards that rely on certain troop types in play or something that they built their deck specifically for. But you're going to get at least one card out of the deal. Jukebox becomes a very big target right away. Any card that gives you extra cards is a big target, but Jukebox especially, because nobody likes having their stuff used against them. He is a little bit more disposable. Originally his health was a 5 in beta testing, and it was tweaked to a 4, so he's a little bit easier to dispose on the following turn. However, if you can keep him around, if you can pump him up with the Ferrous Manus boost, if you can pump him up with something that adds to defense, if you can give him stealth, the escape vent that's new in the Chaos expansion, buy some stealth for a turn. That's one way to keep him around for a little bit longer and really start to benefit from his use. Most people, like I said, if they've got Jukebox, they tend to run him. He's a card that gives you value. He gives you a card, and he gives you an opponent's card, and it can be any of the rarities. And there have been times when I'm playing Emperor's Children that I know they got my Perfection's Flight because that's what they use on me at turn 7. So it's not... If you have 1,600 gems and you see Jukebox in the shop, and I haven't seen him in the shop in a while, pick him up because he's a good buy. Crack Grenade. Depending on your deck, if for some of those decks running massive damage tactics, they will run 2 of these, I think. 5 damage to a troop for a vehicle troop, and 2 to any other unit, which includes a warlord. If not, as a one of, it's still not a bad choice. If you're looking to try to find some direct damage in your deck, Crack Grenade is a solid choice. 3 for a payoff. I think it used to be 2. I could be wrong, but 5 damage to a vehicle does in most vehicles. Most mid-game 5 drop and below vehicles, and 2 to any other unit is just always gonna be useful because like I said, you can use that on the warlord to kind of seal the deal. And I'm sure early game you've seen that because Crack Grenade should be available to most of the starting decks. So the Salon 11th Infantry, they've also got the Backlash draw card. They are a little bit more durable than those scouts up above with the 1/1 scouts with the 2/3. But despite that, I don't see these guys being included too often outside of event decks. They might be generated by some cards, but even though they draw you a card for a 3-drop, there's better choices out there, especially within the legions themselves. I usually pass on these guys. Training Cage is seeing some play. It was an event reward or an event addition to the game, depending on which faction won, and the faction that won gave it the +1/+1 troops in your hand. I like the fluff. I like the idea behind it. The cost is a little high, but depending on your deck, you're going to be able to utilize that and take advantage of it if you've got some higher cards in your hand. Or even if you want to buy yourself some time and add that, you're getting a +1/+1 to the troops in your hand. Theoretically, if you've got 2 or more troops in your hand, that's a decent benefit. That's a decent benefit because it doesn't increase their cost at all. It just increases that stat, and there are a lot of troops where that stat makes a big deal. So, take that for what it is. Training Cage is one of those things that you're just kind of looking for something to try out. I would include it. I'd include it as a one of. Valis Brigade, I don't include. These guys are disposable. They come up a lot with the Ornithopter's Barge. The Barge. but they can be quick fired, they can be Loganed, they can be anything with a 2 can take these guys out. And 4 is nice, so if you get 3 or 4 frontline guys and one of them happens to be these guys are going to be the first target, because the next turn, if they don't take your Valus Brigade, then you just shove 4 down their throat. But most likely that's just not going to happen. So cool art, nice little swing for 3, but they're not something that you'd put in your deck, I don't think. The trackers, on the other hand, that's actually a pretty good play. There are, like I said, there are decks that are not seeing as many troops in play, so the benefit would be a little bit reduced. It is going to gain you at least +1 for their Warlord. But if they've got 3 or 4 troops out there, he's coming in with a 4, and he can become 3/6, and that's a pretty formidable front line. So that's not a bad choice for your 4. If you can get those, if you got 1 and you're kind of looking for a front line option, that is worth considering, because I think they're a pretty good 4-drop front line. Crumbling Battleground is the latest addition to the game, I believe, in the event reward option. So this one here, at the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to all other units. I want to see this work. I want to see this in decks more. I want to see this really just kind of, burn the field and put the pressure on in the game. I want to see decks utilize this as a structure so it can attack. However, it's not frontline, so it's very susceptible to being attacked, but at least at the end of your turn, when you put it in, it's going to do 1 damage to all the other units, so you're going to get 1 damage out of it. And if you time it right, that might take out some of the troops if they've got 1 health left. So I want to see this included in more decks. The Felician Airborne, these guys are not bad. They, as a 4-drop, I've seen them outside of event decks, primarily because they come in with stealth. So they're going to come in. They are susceptible to some of the random damages, in the fact that that with the 3 health, they might get defensive satellite. They could get an artillery strike followed up with some other splash damage to take them out, but that stealth option buys them some time, whether that's buying them an additional turn to use, or having them sit back in the rafters and then kind of using them to pick and choose. They're coming in with a 5 attack as well, so that's a very decent swing. So they're not a bad choice. They're useful, and you could actually most likely benefit from them the following turn, unless they get lucky with their scatter damage. Morkov's Rangers is kind of the opposite of the frontline guy, where these guys come in and they get more attack for each enemy in play. They've got a 4 health, so they're little durable. They're nothing to build around, and they definitely kind of bank on your opponent having a lot of enemies, or your opponent having a lot of units in play. So, if I had to choose, I'd probably choose something else. It would just depend. If I had the room, maybe I'd fit these guys in. What I would prefer to use is probably the Mechanicum Mechandrite guy, which is a rare, but as a 4-drop, I'd rather have those. Or if you're looking for a 4 to fill, these guys, they're annoying, and for a good reason. They backlash. If it's your opponent's turn, they go to your hand, so they're never going to go away. If your opponent keeps killing them, he's wasting his time, he's wasting his energy dealing with these guys, getting rid of them. Usually I'll find a way to make it where they have to use them on me, and then they lose them. But occasionally there are times when you just you've got to deal with these guys turn after turn after turn, and that's not a bad thing. That's our card recursion, so you're not losing a troop. You don't have to worry about being short of troops on your hand, and they're doing 4, which is a good swing. So if you've got these guys and you're just kind of looking for a 4 and you need some troops, they're not a bad choice depending on your legion. If you're going for the neutrals, these are definitely worth considering. Mortar Strike is very, very played, especially right now with the solo warlord decks out there, because there is no other random enemies for it to go to. It's gonna do 5 damage to that warlord because they don't have any other troops in play. It's also useful if they've got troops out that are in stealth, like Mortathanum, which is the Raven Guard stealth guy. If it hits him, he's gone. That's the 5 health. He has 5 health, and it would take him out. If it doesn't, it's going to hit their warlord and do 5 damage. Is nice for 4. I used to run 2 of these in Karn, and I would gladly trade the 4 health with Karn if it meant taking out one of their troops so they only had just their warlord left. So I'd trade 4 plus potentially the other ping to deal 5. It's kind of a silly swing, but sometimes it worked out really well. Mortar Strike is not a bad card at all. These guys here, I see people try to use them. I don't see too many people use them with their ability, but they've got a health of 5, and if they do stick around, they can deal 4 damage, which can go to the warlord. Again, there are better options, better choices, depending on what your legion is, but if you need something or you're looking for something for direct damage and you don't have it, these guys can offer that to you. They can survive at least a turn. Their cost to use is a little big, so it's going to burn you a little bit. You may not use them the turn that they come out on, turn 4, because then that's only going to leave you 2 energy on turn 5 to use. So they may be more beneficial to play mid to late game as opposed to early on. Smirnov's Warriors is very similar to the Rangers there in terms of annoyance factor, because if your opponent has 3 or more units, you just get these guys in your hand. You don't have to worry about them even being killed. You just get an extra copy of it. So you can just keep hitting them with Smirnov's Warriors all day long and just throw out that horde of Imperial Army guys. Obviously, you're looking at the rarity, so you've got rare, and then you've got epic, and that's kind of the same version of the card with improved rarity. You can have both, and some do, but I mean, if you're tight on choices, you would go with the one over the other. I don't know if you'd want to spend anything on those guys on the shop or not, but you know, they're good for right decks. Eridan is actually probably one of the only, I don't want to say destruction cards, because it's not a destruction card, but in terms of its effectiveness for neutral factions, it's probably the best thing that they've got. They don't have a straight destroy card. This one stuns an enemy troop and deals 3 damage to it for every enemy troop, which is going to be a minimum of 3. And if they've got 2 or 3 on the table, that's going to be 9 damage. It's going to do, they can take out the big thing, whatever their big thing is. If they got 2 troops, you can take out a 6 health. So it's not a destroy. If they've got shield or something, you're just going to stun them, and you're not going to do the damage. But it's the closest thing that the neutral factions have in terms of that. Its cost is a little high, but I've never seen a troop survive it. So take it for what it's worth. The Duke. I do not own the Duke, nor do I own Jubak. He's just a solid guy. He's just a solid guy for 5. He's a 4/7, so he's gonna be really durable. He's gonna last a turn or 2 at least, unless he gets bounced or instant destroyed. And his ability is one of the most annoying in the game, because you know, if you get him out there and your opponent isn't able to respond, and they can't keep troops on the table. The only payoff to this for your opponent is if they are doing like perfection troops or fast attack troops, in which case returning the troop to the hand is not what you want to do. But outside of that, really, these guys are going to be, or rally, I guess rally would be another option if they're like rallying in and doing damage. Raven Guard have got some of those. But he's a good one to have. If you get him, you're lucky, and you can find a lot of uses for him in a lot of decks. As a 5, he's got a lot of return potential. So Firewalkers, now their rally gives +1 to adjacent units this turn, which can include the Warlord. They are a vehicle, and they're Imperial, and they've got stealth, which is also great. So the turn that they come in, they can't do anything, but they're stealth, so they can do something the next turn, and then they make the units next to them able to do something. I've seen these in Caleb decks, on some event decks, It just kind of depends maybe on what you've got available to you. They are rare, but they're not bad. They're not bad. Hunan's mortars are kind of like a little a mini mortar strike. Once they hit the table, they don't do anything really except just kind of cause annoyance. But they deal 4 damage to a random enemy, which can take out most troops right off the bat. Or if your opponent doesn't play with troops, you just dealt 4 damage to his warlord for 5, and then you also have a troop on the table. So generally, if you're looking for direct damage, even if it's random, these guys are worth considering. Manifest Destiny is a new epic legendary rare to the game, and I like it. I like it a lot. I don't have it. I think it needs to see a lot of play. It has so many uses with any warlord, really. I mean, but there are some warlords in particular, especially the ones who are combat driven. Karn, Angron, Korax. I saw somebody use it with Vulcan, which was really annoying. Survivor 5 is just that little extra oomph that they need to make it out. It can turn your 30 hit point warlord to a 35, essentially, and just kind of go from there. It's nice. It's a 5 cost. Most of the ones that gave something to your warlord are 5, but the payoff with this, I think, is don't play at turn 5. Like, don't play at turn 5. Play if you've got a 5-drop, play something for 5-drop, because it's not instant. The benefit's not instant. The benefit's end game. So if it's in your hand, save it in your hand till you get to that point in game where you want to have that assurity on the table. Don't play it right away if you've got something else to play. If you don't, then use it. That's fine. But if you're throwing that out there and you're holding back from playing a card that you could have played that turn, this won't do anything for you for potentially the end of the game, which maybe wouldn't even do anything. It depends on how the game goes. If you throw a card out there like Hunan's Mortars, you've just done damage, you've got a troop on the table, and then maybe turn 8 or 9, when you're looking kind of low on health, you throw that out there for that extra little turn. I think that's a safer play. That's just my opinion. Missile battery's nice in some decks. It's really high cost, but it pretty much just deals with troops. It's a big target too, though, and it can attack. So you're either sitting there to do nothing, or you're paying the 5 energy. And unless you're playing like a neutral deck, you have got better choices with the 5s. These guys are cool in the fact that they can, for 1 energy, add a copy. However, they don't get to do anything once they're out there. So if you have got an Ornitov deck and you've made these guys frontline, and then you want to get another one, then that's probably a better use of it. Otherwise, a 5 attack, 5 health, I mean, you kind of want to utilize those guys, not just make copies of your troops. So it's an interesting ability, but I like more the 5 for 5 aspect than actually using the ability, unless you kind of need, if you're looking for, I guess, for an extra troop or something. Assad Chimera, here's one that adds a random Imperial Army infantry to your hand, which usually are the chump guys. You don't too often get something good for that one. However, 4 damage and 6 health, so it's something worth attacking. It's something worth doing damage. There are better choices for a 6. It's a common card, so if you're short on it and you're looking tight and you kind of want to try Imperial out, you could throw them in there. I would recommend these guys more. They're 5, 6. They don't give you any random cards, but they are frontline and they're beefy. And they've got, usually your opponent's got to throw a silver bullet at them, or a destroy card or something like that to take them out, because if not, first they're going to get smacked in the face for 5, and second, these guys are going to eat up the frontline option, and they're going to be very durable. And there's other ways to make them even more durable. I saw a Salamander deck, I think, that threw out the Artificer armor on them and just upped their health to obscene amounts. So that's possible. It's very doable. Of course, you know, then you just do like a destroy card on them, but it's nice to see that people are thinking to do those kind of things. Helios Mortar is another 6-drop, which if you've got these guys, they always pay off because their ability happens at the end of your turn. So the first turn you play them, they're going to do something right away, and your opponent's going to try to get rid of these guys as quickly as possible because that's a pain in the neck. 3 damage to a random enemy. If they don't have any other troops, it's just going to their warlord, and if they do have troops, they want to keep them a little bit safer, because that 3 could hit a stealth, it could hit the guy that they've got behind the front line. This is just a solid card. If you're looking for a 6, or you've got front line, if you're running neutral, they're not ever a bad thing to look at and think, do I want to include at least one? Merits Mercenaries. Merits Mercenaries is kind of niche. You got to build your deck around the concept of being able to use it. Too many high cost cards in your deck with Merits Mercenaries and you're not going to gain as big of a benefit. Kind of very similar with a Goldstone deck. You could throw in a Merits Mercenaries with those Mechindrites and pump him up with Mechindrites, and each Mechindrite is going to give him a boost, and then his ability is going to give him a boost in addition to the Mechindrite. So if he can survive the turn he comes out, the next turn you could ramp him up to, like, 12-12 with like Berserk and Bloodthirsty and +3 and Shield, and just get crazy with it. These guys just get crazy. They get crazy. Crazy! So, but again, you have to build your deck around that. You got to have cheap, low-cost cards. So if too many high-cost cards, and they're not gonna benefit you. Ornitov's Barge. If you're finding a way to try to squeeze in frontline in your deck, and you have this card, it's okay. It's random in terms of what you get. Usually you get a lot of chump guys. I've only ever seen one time where my opponent got 3 Ogren, these guys, 3 of these, 3 of those. That made me sad. But usually you end up getting like 3 or 4 chump dudes who buy you a turn, 2 at best if it's like bunker, and then the bunker can't even attack, so what's the point? Again, if you're looking for a way to squeeze in front line, it's okay. It's a good, for certain decks, it's maybe more required than others. Maybe I just haven't been playing with the decks that utilize it more, but personally I would pass on it even if I had it. I'm sorry. I like Ornitov, I like the concept, it's just not for me. Command Post is good, and this has actually been rectified to give friendly frontline and the +2/+2 to another friendly troop, so it can't just pump up itself. You've got to have another troop out in play to use this ability. But if you get this out turn 7 or less, if you've got abandoned supplies or any of those cost reducing cards out in play, you get this out, then the next turn you drop a card, and immediately with 1 energy you make it a +2/+2 frontline, and then you just start going to town from there. You just keep upping it, spread the love, maybe make another +2/+2 frontline for your next turn. This is a powerful card, not to be overlooked as a common. Maybe a 2 of, especially like in an Ornitov deck, or a deck that you've got a lot of troops that you're going to be throwing out there, not to be overlooked. But more if you can especially get the cost down. It's got 9 health, so outside of like some devastating high drop guy coming in and cleaving it down, it's going to last for a couple turns. Or a destroy card, I guess you could destroy it, or you could use this guy on it. So Melt a Bomb. I got one of those. I think that was my first rare in the game, and that was in every deck as a 1 of, all the way up until Mars, I think, and then I kind of had some more cards available to me at my disposal. And the game has shifted a little bit. Not as many vehicles are seen play continuously, or if they are, they're very light, flimsy, so it's kind of overkill to use a 7-drop to kill them. But they destroy a vehicle or a structure. Just straight out destroy. Boom, it's gone. I don't even have to deal, not like Crack Grenade where you have to deal a little bit more damage if it's too high. It just kills it, and it deals 2 damage to an adjacent unit. So it's got splash damage, and you can time that really nicely. Use that many times against Death Guard. It's very useful, and if you get it early on, if you're in that kind of lower range, you're trying to battle in through Prospero, and you get a Melt-A-Bomb as a one-of, it may not pay you off every game, but when it pays off, you'll be glad it did. So the Ogryn Sergeant, I haven't utilized these guys too much lately. I have seen them utilized, especially in the decks where you've got an attacking warlord. Not so much Angron, because by turn 7 or 8 the game should just be about wrapped up. But like Fulgrim or maybe Typhon, and guys who have durability. Direct Rasp might not even be a bad choice, but Death Guard can naturally heal, so they can kind of utilize this ability a little bit more. But these guys can really get going. They are susceptible, obviously, to destruction. Every card in this game is susceptible to destruction to some degree. But if you can't take care of them, then when they hit, it's going to be nasty. As a one-of, I think they're good in certain decks, not every deck, certainly. Your Warlord's got to take the hit, and there are going to be times where if he's on the table, all the hits will go to him rather than the Warlord, which might be what you want, but you might as well just get a frontline troop for that. The Lernia Hydra. I like the ability. I want to see this ability more often on lower cost cards, and not so much maybe cost of 2 or more, but maybe cost of 1 on like a 5-drop or something. That's pretty much all these guys are good for, you know. And don't get me wrong, with the tactic heavy decks that we're seeing, this might be something to consider, but as an 8-drop late in the game, it might not make as big of a difference as people want to make, whereas early to mid game, throwing off their cost for those tactics can really hurt your opponent. This one here, they might only have 1 or 2 tactics left in their hand to play, which are the big ones, but by that point they've got 9 energy to deal with, so that's not as pressing as early on when they really have to pick and choose what they'd be using. Usually you throw this guy out there as a last ditch, and if you get to use him, great, but otherwise that's kind of all he's good for. Shipmaster Kyra, I just picked him up in the shop today because I've had my eye on him. He's got a cheaper version of the Duke's ability. He's much more costly, much more higher in attack and defense. I don't know if I'll use him, but he was on my list of cards to get, so I got him. I would like to see, like, if you could get his cost reduced down and get him out early on, that'd be nice. He's definitely a target, and he can do some offensive if you want to. If they don't have any troops, then that's 8 coming at him. So that's a decent epic. This is probably what I'd say is the trash epic for the Imperial Army, and that's not terrible. It deals 10 damage to a random enemy. You don't have to pay for that. That's cool. That's great. You throw these guys out though, they're 9 energy unless you have a cost reduction, which again, I'd love to see some cost reductions. You throw these guys out there, and the next turn that's going to do 10 damage if they don't destroy it. The problem is, late game, a lot of ways to destroy things, a lot of ways to bounce things. People are holding on to those cards. So will it see its utility returned? Or more importantly, if I can't destroy it, but I can throw down 3 extra troops, then I can break the potential of that 10 damage hitting my warlord. So it's kind of it's not a given. It's not a given that it's going to benefit you. It's not a given that's going to work. Not just yet. The Iron Hands actually have a card that pulls out any deck that they've any vehicle from their deck and puts it into play for, I think that's an 8 cost, which would put this into play at 9 a turn earlier, and it gives it flank. However, this one can't attack, so it doesn't benefit from it as much. So it's really kind of a Hail Mary. I would probably squeeze something else in a deck if I could outside of that, because 7-10 is great. It's intimidating, but it can't attack. So like why can't it just be like 0-12? 012, 212, 212. Make it better. I don't know. Anyways, I would pass on that. Hell's Fury is the, speaking of, is a 512, is kind of the, I guess, the one tier lower rarity in terms of that, where you are paying for the 10 damage to a random enemy, rather than just happening at the start of your turn. And these guys cost 1 more, they have 2 more health, but they've got 2 less attack. So between the 2 of these, I would choose neither. No, I just wouldn't. This card here is new to the game with the Isfahan expansion. I like the artwork. I definitely like the concept behind this card. If you can get this in your hand, if you're building a deck with a lot of troops, a lot of troop killing, whatever, you kind of need to go with a lot of troops for this to really work. And this is going to be neat if you get it in your opening hand, and you can get this cost down to like 4 or 5, and you've got a decent amount of troops still in your hand. I think there's better ways. Training Cage is just a better way to make that work sooner. Although this benefits your troops in play too. So there is the trade-off there. If you've got them and you drop them and you can drop this, they still get the benefit as well as the ones that you couldn't play that turn. So I want to see this in play. I don't think I've seen anybody utilize this yet. But it has potential. I like the concept for it. I think it has to swing the meta more into troop-driven decks again to really see play, because if you're only killing 2 troops from your opponent, then this is still an 8 cost, and it's not gonna make you as happy as it would be if, like, turn 4 this thing was like a 2 for like a 2 cost at that point. I mean, if we were trading, cards for cards every turn. So yeah, I think this is going to be one of those ones that we'll see pop up later on as the meta shifts. So that's it for the Imperial Army cards. That's my take on all of them. This does include the Isfahan expansion. These guys here, like I said, this is just in a bottle, just kind of the card by card, but there is, because they're a neutral faction, they have use in so many different ways depending on what legion you choose to use them with. You don't have to use any of these. There are some decks I've got which is like 99% all legion cards, except for the gold stones, because I love gold. But outside that, I mean, you could do an all legion deck and you wouldn't have to worry about it. But if you're looking for something different, you're looking for frontline especially, the Imperial Army have that to offer. They have a lot of options to offer any sort of deck, and more annoyance factor than others in terms of some of the stuff that they can throw out there and kind of hinder your opponent or and draw fire. Jubok, Goldstone, those are your big guys, man. The Duke, oh, look at that guy, look at him. He's got a bionic eye patch. It's like an eye patch, but it's bionic, and his hat is like, I don't know. We're trying to figure out what his hat is. Is he like going? Is he going like old school Rough Rider model? If you remember those Rough Riders from GW, like way back when. What is he? I don't know. Look at that look on his face. He's like, get back in that hand. You get back in that hand. Get up there. Anyways, so that's the Imperial Army in a bottle. Next up, I'll probably take a look at some of the features in the game in terms of navigating the shop, navigating lodges, giving some little small pointers. It should probably be a shorter video, just in terms for some of those new players who might be stumbling through those things just by themselves. I know there's definitely some things that have been tweaked and some things that I had to discover myself, so it'd be kind of good to show that for newer players. So again, shorter video probably coming up next, and then I'll go into the Mechanicum and Chaos. I would like to build a deck and then demo a deck with just those 3, as well as the Sons of Horus Legion that I've already shown, just to kind of show the cards in flow. So maybe a Tarvitz demo coming up. If you're not familiar with Tarvitz, you will be soon enough. And if you have Tarvitz, and you've got some of these cards, ooh, the world is going to open up for you. So, anyways, thank you for watching. I hope you found this enjoyable. I have maybe some information, maybe some things you agree with, some things you disagree with. Maybe you saw some cards that you didn't think you would put to use before, and it put some ideas in your head. Either which way, I look forward to doing the next one. Look forward to comments. And just in general, keep playing Legions. Keep having fun. It's a good game, and for the devs, keep making these cards, having a good time. Looking forward to the next neutral Imperial Army warlord that we expect to see, because I think that can shake up things, and a lot of people, the other neutrals aren't going to get as much love, but it's nice to have options out there. So until then, I will talk to you guys later. All right, so thank you.